Chapter 2. A life worth 2 pellets. True in your heart. These words in the deep, fruity hoot of his father were perhaps the last thing Soren remembered before he landed with a soft thud on the pile of moss, shaking himself and feeling a bit dazed. He tried to stand up. Nothing seemed broken, but how had this happened? He had certainly tried not flying while his parents were out hunting. Then, in Jesus Christ, he surely hadn't tried branching yet. And he was so far from flight readiness, as his mom called it. So how had this happen? All he knew is that one moment he was on the edge of the hollow, peering out, waiting for his mom and dad to come home. The next minute he went tumbling through the air. Soren tipped his head up. The fir tree was tall, and he knew that their hollow was on the very top. What had his father said? 90 feet, 100 feet? But numbers had no meaning for Soren. Not only could he fly, but he couldn't count either. He didn't really know his numbers, and there was one thing he did know, that he was in trouble. Deep, horrifying trouble. The boring lectures that Claude had complained about came back to him. The weight of the terrible truth now pressed upon him in the darkness of the forest. Those grim words, an owlet that is separated from its parents before it is learned to fly and hunt cannot survive. And Soren's parents were gone on a long hunting flight. They had not been on many since Eglantine hatched, but they needed more food because winter was coming. So right now Soren was completely alone. He could not imagine being more completely alone as he gazed up to the tree that seemed to vanish into the clouds. He sighed and muttered, "So alone, so alone." Yet, deep inside him, something flickered like a tiny smoldering smoke of hope. When he had fallen, he must have done with his nearly bald wings that captured the air, as his father would say. He tried to now recall this feeling. For a moment, fallen as he felt wonderful. So perhaps he could recapture that air. He tried to lift his wings and fluttered them slightly. Nothing. His wings felt cold and bare in the crisp autumn breeze. He looked at the tree again. He could climb using his talons and beak. He had to think some best, or he could become some creature's next meal. Oh, a rat? A raccoon? Soren felt faint at the very thought of a raccoon. He had seen them from the nest. Bushy, maxed, horrible creatures with sharp teeth. He must listen carefully, and he must turn and tip his head as his parents taught him. His parents could listen so carefully that from high above in their tree hollow they could hear the heartbeat of a mouse on the forest. Surely he'd be able to hear a raccoon. He cocked his head and nearly jumped. He did hear a sound. It was a small, raspy voice from up the tree. "Soren, Soren, it called from the hollow where his brother and sister were nestled in the purr, fluffy white down that their parents had plucked from beneath their flight feathers. It was neither Claude or Eglantine. Mrs. Pliffer! Soren cried. Soren, are you alive? Oh dear, of course you are if you can say my name. How stupid of me. Are you well? Did you break anything? I don't think so. But how will I ever get back up? Oh dear, Mrs. Pliffer moaned. She was not that much in a crisis. One could expect seeing some nestmates, Soren supposed. How long do you suppose till Mom and Dad get home? Soren called up. Oh, it would be a long while, dearie. Soren hop-stepped to the roots of the tree that ran above the ground like gnarled talons. He could now see Mrs. Pliffer. Her small head was glistening rosy scales over the edge of the hollow. Where Mrs. Pliffer's eyes would have been, there would be two small indentations. This is simply behind me, she sighed. How the hell can she even see if she doesn't have eyes? Is Claude awake? Maybe he could help me. There was a long pause before Mrs. Pliffer answered weakly. Well, perhaps, she sounded hesitant. Soren could hear her now nudging Claude. Don't be grumpy, Claude. Your brother has taken a tumble where... Soren heard his brother yawn. Oh my! Claude sighed and didn't sound exactly upset. Soren thought. Soon the large head of his big brother peered over the hollow. His white, heart-shaped face with the immense dark eyes peered through the tree down on Soren. I say, Claude drawled, you got yourself in a terrible fix. I know, Claude. Can't you help? You know more about flying than I do. Can't you teach me? Me? Teach you? I don't know where to begin. Have you got yoinks? Start even yoinks. Me teach you? He laughed again. I'm not yoinks. You're always telling me how much you know, Claude. This was the truth. Claude had been bragging on about his superiority ever since Soren had hatched out. He should get the favorite spot in the hollow because he was already losing his downy fluff in preparation for his flight feathers and therefore would be colder. He deserved the largest hunks of mouse meat after all because he was on the brink of flying. And you already had your first flight ceremony. Tell me how to fly, Claude. One cannot tell another to fly, for it is a feeling. Besides, Mom and Dad should be really impertinent of me to usurp their position. Soren had no idea what usurp meant. Claude often used big words to impress him. What are you talking about? Usurp? Sounded like the yarp, Soren said, but what would yarping have to do with teaching him to fly? Time was running out. The light was leaking out days in, and evening showers were falling. The raccoons would soon be out. I can't do it, Soren, Claude replied in a very serious voice. It would be extremely improper for a young owlet like myself to assume this role in your life. My life isn't going to be worth 2 pallets if you don't do something. Do you think it's improper for you to let me die? What would Mom and Dad say? I think they will understand completely. Great Glocks. Understand completely. He had to be yoinks. Soren had to be too dumbfounded. He could not say a dumb word. I'll get help. Help, Soren. I'll go to Hilda's. He heard Mrs. P. raps. Hilda was another snake for an owl family near the bank of trees. near the banks of the river. I wanted, if I were you, P. Claude's voice was ominous. It made Soren's gizzard absolutely quiver. Hey, don't call me P. That's so rude. The last thing you have to worry about, P, is me being rude. Soren blinked. I'm going, Claude. You can't stop me, Mrs. Clifford said firmly. Can I? Soren heard a rustling sound. Good glocks. What was happening? Mrs. Pliffer! Only silence now. Mrs. Pliffer? Soren called again. Maybe she'd gone to Hilda's. Only he could hope and wait. It was nearly dark, and a chill wind rose up. There was no sign of Mrs. Pliffer returning. First teeth, is that what Dad always called these cold winds? The first teeth of winter. These very words made poor Soren shudder. When his father first used this expression, Soren had no idea what teeth even were. He explained to them that it was something owls didn't have, but most other animals did. They were for chewing and tearing apart food. Does Mrs. Pliffer have any teeth? Soren asked. Mrs. Pliffer gasped in disgust. His mother said, Of course not, dear. Then what are they? They exactly. Soren asked. His mother said as she thought for a moment. Just imagine a mouthful of beaks. Yeah, very sharp beaks. That sounds very scary. Yes, it can be. His mother replied, That's why we do not want you to follow the hollow or try to fly before you're ready, because raccoons have very sharp teeth. You see, his father broke in, we all have no need for such things as teeth. Our gizzards help us take care of that chewing business, as I find it rather revolting, the notion of actually chewing something in one's mouth. They say it adds flavor, darling, his mother said. I get flavor, plenty of flavor in my gizzard. Where do you think that old expression, I know it in my gizzard, comes from, Orda? I have a feeling in my gizzard, Marella. Noctis, I'm not sure if that's the same thing as flavor. That mouse we had for dinner last night, I can tell you from my gizzard where exactly he had been of late. He had been feasting on the sweet grass of the meadow, mixed with the nudies by that little old tree that grows down the stream. Great glocks! I don't need teeth to taste. Oh dear! Soren thought. He would never hear this gentle bickering between his parents again. A centipede pittered by, and Soren didn't even care. Darkness gathered. The black in the night grew deeper and deeper from down on the ground, and he could barely see the stars. This was perhaps the worst. He could not see the sky for the thickness of the trees. How much he missed the hollow. For their empty nest, there wasn't always one piece of sky to watch. At night, it was sparkled with stars or raced with clouds. At daytimes, there was often a lovely patch of blue, and sometimes towards the evening before twilight, the clouds turned pink and orange. There was an odd smell down the ground, damp and moldy. The wind sighed against the branches for the leaves and the needles of the forest trees. But down the ground, well, the wind didn't even seem to touch the ground. There was a terrible stillness, the stillness of a windless place. This was no place for an owl to be. Everything was so different. If his feathers had even been half plunged, he could have plumped them down, up, and the downy fluff beneath his flight feathers would have kept him warm. But he was supposed to try calling for Eglantine. But where could she be? She was so young. Besides, he called out, wouldn't that alert other creatures in the forest that he was here? Creatures with teeth? He guessed his life wasn't worth 2 pellets. but even worthless. He still missed his parents. He missed them so much that he felt something been sharp. Yes, he did feel something in his gizzard, sharp as a tooth.